on pre-production, and I knew I was going to say it, but I didn't there. Locked on Ole Miss. Stephen Willis is with us. What's up, man? How we doing?
Pretty good, man. I'm glad to be on the show. And besides, Caroline Fenton does a fantastic job. And if anybody wants to check out at Locked On LSU, do that as well.
She does. I love your – I got to tell you this before we get rolling, dude. I love your setup.
Thank you.
It is amazing. I think you do a great job. I was listening to you right before the show. Me and the team were sitting here listening to you. Look, I want to start here first because I think we agreed on one thing before pre-production. Defensively for Ole Miss, safety play has been a big question mark. What's going on there? It just seems like it's been a really big issue for the Rebs so far.
See, a big problem that Ole Miss has had with Pete Golding is they recruited a ton of personnel for what Chris Partridge did and what DJ Durkin did. And they got some players in the transfer portal, like what LSU is doing in the secondary at the moment, but they couldn't get enough players. So some of those players are a little bit clunky fit. And, Ishim Young, he's more of a box safety. He's having to play a little bit back. And you lost AJ Finley, and AJ Finley was a sneaky big time player for that defense, even in that Partridge system. But I definitely agree with you. The safety position is probably the weak point of that defense. Now, one of the strong suits of that defense is Suntarian Perkins. And
Perkins in number 4. How about that?
Yes. And he has a little bit of Harold Perkins, honestly, going through. He had 2 sacks against Alabama, 2.5 tackles for loss. True freshman. He basically kicked off and did everything for Raleigh, Mississippi in a state championship game. He's a really good football player, and I'm not convinced he has ever stepped on a football field when he wasn't the best player on it.
Let's go to last week because a lot's been made of the Ole Miss game versus Alabama. That first couple of drives, I know you punted on the first one, but then the drive where it ended with Dart in the QB draw, I was like, oh, hell, here comes Ole Miss. Like, they ain't going to stop it. I know this is such a loaded question, but what went wrong for them offensively?
Well, first of all, Lane Kiffin is one of the best script writers in college football. The first 10 to 15 plays is going to be better than you're going to see pretty much anywhere else. But after that, they just couldn't get a feel of what Alabama was doing. And what Alabama was doing was beating the crap out of them up front and going man to man. And whenever you have a situation where Trey Harris was injured, he couldn't play, or he played 2 or 3 snaps, but he couldn't really go. Zachary Franklin, his first game back from surgery, rusty. Caden Prieskorn, first game back after surgery. All of them came back. So, and then you have Quinshawn, who is not 100% and hasn't been 100%.
Yeah, he does not look it either.
And you have a situation where Charlie Weiss Jr. and Lane Kiffin just couldn't get a feel for the game. And I do honestly think that Alabama and Nick Saban's in Lane Kiffin's head, more so than any other school in the conference. And you mix all that together, and the second quarter happened where you didn't run the ball one time. You had 3 3-and-outs, throwing the ball with about a total of a minute of time of possession. Pete Golding's defense played fantastic, had them in the game ready to go, but they just wore down over time. Right. And that second quarter was almost malpractice.
Yeah, and Jace McClellan, in that second half, specifically, Stephen, midway through that third, he really started finding it, right? Like, he really started finding that running game. So I said that this team was a lot like how LSU was after week 1. A lot of people writing them off. Really a lot like Arkansas was last week. A lot of people writing them off after a loss to BYU. I feel the same kind of ways, man, about Ole Miss. Is Trey Harris going to be able to come back? Is Juckins going to be 100%? Like, how do you feel going into this game this week in reference to after what happened last week?
Honestly, I feel better this week than I did last week. I picked Alabama to win the game last week. It was one of those situations against Alabama. You threw the interception, Alabama scored the big play touchdown, and the quarterback got rocked. And it was like by the power of Grayskull, like old He-Man. And Alabama just woke up. And at that point over, it's like, okay, there's Alabama. We got that happen. And it was just a weird situation. But, talking about this week against LSU, and this is my key, and I heard you talking about LSU's front seven. Ole Miss has to earn the right to throw against that secondary.
I agree.
You do that by running the football. You need to mix up zone schemes, gap schemes, and you need to get back to playing, honestly, old man football. And if you have a little bit of success doing that, you get the right to throw against that secondary. Because I can tell you what, right now, and I will say this in front of your fans and everybody else, if it's 3rd and 12, if it is 2nd and 10, and that happens consistently, LSU's rushmen are going to get home. You cannot win in that situation.
You can't, and it seems like a lot of this offense for Lane is predicated off of the run and play action and motion and getting those safeties to bite on things, and they just weren't. They weren't biting on anything. And the question that I have for you is: Trey Harris going to be ready to go? Do you think?
Yeah, if Trey Harris got on the field against Alabama, he's going to play against LSU. I don't know if hungry dogs could keep Trey Harris off the field against LSU.
Well, look, I said this, Stephen. So about 3.5 years ago, I let it well known, and it kind of got me my credential pulled. I wanted LSU to go after Trey Harris bad, okay, and was begging some of the old staff, and they said no. Well, welcome to 2023, brother. If he plays and he can get loose, LSU might have an issue.
If you have a situation with Zachary Franklin on the other side with a healthy Trey Harris and get loose, LSU's got a problem on the back end.
I agree.
Like I said, you have to earn the right to be able to try and victimize that secondary. And I'm not 100% sure that Ole Miss can do that, because this is the problem that Lane Kiffin had against Alabama and has had throughout this season. They've gotten too cute with their play calling. They're doing 2nd and 3rd level RPOs, which take long to get going, to diagnose. Well, the problem is when you play against an Alabama, when you play against an LSU, when you play against a Georgia, you're not going to have 3 seconds to make that read. You need something quicker. And I think pop passes, I think bubbles, I think hitches, I think slants. That's where Ole Miss is going to make their money against LSU. And then it's going to open up the deeper stuff. And if Ole Miss does this, they have a chance to do really well. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ole Miss win the game by double digits if that happens. But if it doesn't, and LSU is able to clamp down on the run and make it to where 3rd and long and all that happens, LSU's going to win this game in a boat race.
See, and even then, I stress, Stephen, if Ole Miss is in a 3rd and long, that I don't know if LSU can stop them there either. You know, yeah. I mean, they're in the 90s. They're 99th overall in 3rd down conversion rate.
Well, they're going to line Harold Perkins up on Micah Pettis, and Micah Pettis is a 360-pound right tackle, and Harold Perkins is going to go right around him.
Do you think that is a massive, like, how big is that? I don't want to say mismatch, but I mean,
I think that is a matchup to watch if you're an LSU fan. Micah Pettis he holds also, so that can be drive killers as well. So LSU doesn't necessarily have to get home; they just have to win. And they're probably going to draw a couple of flags. But if he can stay ahead of the chains and not be afraid to go 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, and do that over and over again, I don't know if LSU is going to be able to stop them, honestly.
You know who I'm kind of sneaky scared about for this game that nobody's talking about is the Bentley kid.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. How's your kickoff man?
Not that – I mean, well – he has got pretty much a touchback every time.
Okay.
But when he hadn't, Mississippi State, it hadn't looked completely great.
Yeah. The problem with Bentley is he used a lot on special teams. They did use him against Georgia Tech, but they didn't use him that much against Alabama.
Which I didn't get. I don't get that.
I'm telling you, that was a weird game, man. That was a really weird game. And I mean, I don't know if Kiffin, like I said, Alabama, I think, is just in Kiffin's head.
I mean, the Bentley kid was the one on the wheel route in the 4th and 24, and you got the conversion. I'm like, say, bro, if there ain't nobody that's going to get you yardage, the Wade kid and Bentley, don't take them off. I know that you got Judkins. I get it. But right now, give the ball to 24. That's all I kept thinking. Give it to him. See what he can do. Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss podcast. how do you see this game playing out early for LSU offensively that's had some slow starts? I mean, look, they've really been good this year. They're in the top 10 on every offensive metric. How do you think that they're able to start off and go against this Ole Miss defense?
I think LSU's the best offense that Ole Miss is going to play this year. Honestly, I honestly thought Jaden Daniels would struggle in his second year for whatever reason. I thought maybe the end of the year was a flash in the pan, and boy, was I wrong. The guy's been absolutely electric. And then you have Malik Neighbors, who is just another LSU first-round wide receiver sitting on the outside. But if you take those two players away, where's the production? So you have to figure out a way to lock up Neighbors, and nobody's been able to do that.
Right.
I mean, nobody. But if you can do that, literally half of the passing production is Daniels to Neighbors,
if not more.
Yeah, and I think Golding is going to figure out a way to try and bracket that. Try to keep Neighbors, do a lot of inside leverage type stuff to force him outside, to keep him out of the middle of the field, because I think at corner we're pretty good. At safety, it's a little bit of a struggle. So if it's happening outside the hash marks, Ole Miss probably feels better than if it happened inside the hash marks, if that makes sense.
What if so they've been moving him a lot in the slot. Do you think that LSU should utilize him there if they're going to attack?
Yeah. Now, Ole Miss is, like I said, their third corner. All of their defensive backfield on the outside were converted corners. So all of them can cover. The problem is in that strong safety position. And Trey Washington, he's made plays for Ole Miss this season, but he still isn't A.J. Finley. And those two positions are interesting. It'll be really cool to see if Ole Miss can figure out a way to line up Suntarine Perkins on the left side, force Jaden Daniels to scramble to his left, and maybe you can try and cut down half the field and maybe cut him away from Malik Neighbors and cut him off that way. Because I do think that they are going to use Suntarine Perkins the way that LSU used Harold Perkins last year.
Yeah, good. Lane said, I think in the press conference about moving Perkins back to inside linebacker, he goes, well, I went and got my own Perkins. Is what he said. I thought that was pretty funny. And look, Lane's going to say at least one good thing about the opposing team every single press conference. Let me ask you this, though. Look, I'm not on boards, message boards. It's just not me. I'm not going to go look. But Message Board Genius, they're really good friends of ours. And, I go and look. A lot of people are a little upset with Kiffin. Am I taking that the wrong way? Or is there some, is the honeymoon phase over?
The honeymoon phase ended whenever the Auburn stuff happened last year. So Kiffin is having to deal with a little bit of blowback when he wouldn't have. It's kind of self-inflicted. There's a segment of the fan base that there's nothing he's going to do. He's going to get more than he's expected. And plus, Kiffin is a little bit of a Twitter troll. There's a little bit of a piper to pay whenever you do something like that. And like Nick Saban talking about, hey, Mississippi State's going to be a tougher challenge than Ole Miss. That's directly for Lane Kiffin.
1,000%. 1,000%. No doubt. That was actually, I can't be real with you. I didn't think that was coming. I actually because we do our national show and we stopped it. We're in pre-production and we hear that. And me and my buddy, my co-host Joe, we look at each other like, what did he just say? Old Nick with a little shot to old Kevin. That I feel like that's a little friendly banter though, because you don't see Saban doing stuff like that. I didn't take it as big as some people, I guess, took it like last week and everything that Kiffin was saying.
Yeah, I think it's friendly. I don't think it's necessarily malicious, but Saban's drones, Paul Feinbaum was all over this as well. So Saban doesn't have to be malicious with it because he's got people that will carry his water for him.
No question. Couple more, I'll get you out of here, man. You're fantastic. You know how much success that you guys had. I love having you on here. What in reference to Lane, if God forbid he were to lose on Saturday, would it really be bad for him? Does he need to get a big win, or has he gotten one? And having the 10-win season, does that carry more weight too?
I think he needs to win. Lane needs this game. He just needs it to shut people up. And
Right.
there's nothing real that's happening. And I mean, it's all just noise at this point, but it still is there. And if it happens again where LSU wins the game, the noise is going to get a little bit louder. And if Ole Miss lost the game to Arkansas the week after that, the noise would get a little bit louder. But Lane Kiffin makes $9 million a year. He's the first year of a 6-year contract. Ole Miss has a Jimbo level contract. Ole Miss can't buy him out. There's nothing that can be done. So Lane does need to win, but that's only just because just to quiet the noise.
Right. I mean, he's in no trouble.
Yeah,
I mean,
none.
He's in no trouble. And you got to let him, tell me if I'm wrong here. I feel like at Ole Miss, you got to let him build a little bit longer than maybe somewhere else. Am I wrong there? Because I think that he can build. I mean, with Pete, look, I people in here don't agree with me on this in recruiting. I know what Pete's doing in Louisiana in recruiting, and he's going to get some of them kids.
Ole Miss has the best roster they've had in my lifetime as far as talented players. It just doesn't even you look at it in their quarterback room. They've got Austin Simmons, who would be a top 50 player as a 4th string quarterback.
Right.
Walker Howard is the 3rd string quarterback. You guys know about him. Spencer Sanders was a 4-year starter and a former Big 12 freshman of the year. He's the backup quarterback. And Jackson Dart was a former Gatorade National Player of the Year. That's just an example. And Lane has done similar to that in most every position. The question, what he needs to do is get that win, because the noise of him not able to win the big one, all of a sudden people are starting to chirp that. And the longer that goes on, the louder it's going to be. And honestly, if Ole Miss can get a win Saturday night, all of that would stop, because obviously this would be a big win.
I wasn't going to ask you until you brought up Walker Howard. How has old little Walker looked? Because, I think there's some LSU fans a little bitter about that one. They don't like it too much.
He looked amazing in the spring game.
Yeah.
And honestly, we talk people all the time is like, hey, maybe bringing Spencer Sanders in was a mistake, because the kids look that good. And, we have to see. Maybe Lane Kiffin has something up his sleeve with Spencer Sanders for Saturday night. I think that is an absolute possibility. But Walker Howard, if something happened to Jackson Dart, let's say Jackson Dart got injured, God forbid, everybody in the fan base would want Walker Howard to go in and play quarterback.
Instead of Sanders. Boy, talk about speaking something into existence. Don't do it to me. Yeah. Let me get to next year so I can build about half a show against Walker Howard.
Yeah, and next year's the 2024 first year of the playoff, the 12-team playoff. Ole Miss has a legit chance to be good enough to get into that and play the biggest game in the history of Ole Miss. Walker Howard is likely going to be the guy calling signals that year. Ole Miss fans realize that, hey, reps are good in this situation. So if Ole Miss loses another couple of games, you're going to see the call for Walker grow in the Ole Miss fan base.
Very interesting. Very interesting. What's your favorite LSU? And by the way, okay, guys, yes, I don't know if you've seen some of the comments, but I got 2 in the text line. Your Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles thing on your mic here. Do you want to explain? Do you want to tell the people what that is?
Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles sponsors my show. They're a dill pickle company on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and in Louisiana. You can get their stuff on the pickledstore.com. A jar of it. It's basically Cajun spice. It's really good. It's got dill flavor. Justin and those guys do a fantastic job, and I am happy to advertise for them because they are a true small business, and that makes me happy that they took their opportunity to spend their money on what I was doing. So yes, I put it on the most valuable thing that I have.
Absolutely. No question. What's your favorite LSU Ole Miss memory?
Well, there's a couple of them. I'm going to go back to whenever I was a kid. I remember Timmy Moffitt taking a punt back in 83 and then getting showered by liquor bottles because I was in the LSU section. I remember David Browndyke's missed field goal in 86. You go into the 90s whenever Ole Miss ran for like 400 yards in Tiger Stadium with Deuce McAllister.
Yeah, that was my first, Stephen, that was the first LSU game I'd ever been to.
Really?
Yeah, was when Deuce went loose.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And then 2015 with Les Miles and his clock management, whenever you brought that up. Yeah, thank y'all very much.
Well, who was it? McCluster got the outside zone.
The halfback pass. Yes.
The halfback pass.
Shea Hodge, I think, maybe.
Right. You know, the one that lives, speaking of that, the one that lives in my memory, just because, you know, you talk the Ole Miss side, like the LSU side, was when Eli got stepped on and then LSU would go to win the Natty. Like, and then now Saban, remember, I'm sure you saw this, but when Eli did the Eli's Places or whatever it's called, and he went and talked to Saban, and Saban said it was the best stomp foot in America that day is when you went down. So, like, this game has had some really, really good history. I hope it happens again. And, you know, obviously I want LSU, you want Ole Miss, but hopefully it's still a really good game.
Yeah, and I honestly, football, I'm from South Mississippi. If I was not an Ole Miss fan, if I was not born into it to where I didn't have a choice to do it, I guarantee you I would have been an LSU fan. I was on Ed Orgeron's staff at Ole Miss. I mean, there's ties.
I did not know this. Were you really?
Yeah, I was the video coordinator at Ole Miss. I worked for a year under Brandon Fairburn, who came from LSU to Ole Miss.
Yeah. And, what was it like walking in the building every day with Ed?
Honestly, it was like walking on eggshells if you worked for the man.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you expound on that? I don't mean to keep you. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, okay. This was my first year working in there, and we were having summer camps. If y'all know what that's like.
Summer camps. It's big for summer camps, baby.
And we're getting ready to do that, and they line up to where our training staff, who had just went under David Cutcliffe and went to the Ed Orgeron thing, and he had what we called cows, which was basically like coolers with a dolly thing that had plastic that come out and you could drink water.
Right.
Well, Ed Orgeron wanted water bottles. And afterwards, he told the trainer at Ole Miss that he wanted water bottles. And the trainer decided to talk back.
No.
What ensued was about a 55-minute screaming match that was the equivalent of a hairdryer about water bottles now. That happened, that ended up with the trainer quitting being a trainer at Ole Miss. And this wasn't like a joke. This was the head trainer, a legacy trainer at Ole Miss. He just walked away. He's like, nope, I have nothing to do with that. And it got so loud, I just got up and left. Because it just happened over and over again. It was one of those things. And he has that Houma, Louisiana accent that is so hard to understand. And he would tell you something and you would just feel bad. It's like, I'm about to have to say, huh? I understand. I have no idea what he's saying. And a lot of that happened, but there was eggshells. He liked what he liked. And if you didn't do exactly what he wanted, you heard about it.
The Roback commercials are great. I don't know why people are all over him about the Roback commercials.
Yeah,
I love the Roback commercials. Just throwing that out.
It's fun. It is fun, and you know, Ed Orgeron can be a cartoon character. He can. That is his gift. That and recruiting.
Stephen Willis at